All right, everyone, welcome to Phoenixville Public Library, those of you in our community room here and those of you on Zoom, to our presentation tonight from the Historical Society of Phoenixville, a trip down memory lane for many people here and on Zoom, and maybe some surprises too of places that have changed in Phoenixville over the years. Who better to give us this tour than Jack Ertell from the Historical Society. He is acting chairman of the board for the Historical Society of the Phoenixville Area, and he also serves there as newsletter editor and chair of the Archives Committee. So Jack, take it away, and thanks for doing this for us tonight.
Thank you. Looks like half the audience are familiar faces. How many of you are longtime residents of Phoenixville?
How long? What's long? What's long?
What's long?
More than 20 years.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's it.
Okay. We've got some folks that are newer as well, and which is good. And I can't pull the audience that are watching us, but I hope you find this interesting tonight. By the way, one of my titles I have dropped off. I'm no longer the interim or acting chairman of the board. We changed officers September 1st, so that's one less job I have. But that's okay, they always find other jobs for me. What we're going to do tonight is kind of look at Phoenixville history, working our way backwards. There's a lot of these programs that do now, then and now kind of things where they show you something and say, well, this is what it's like now. But we're going to take a stroll around parts of Phoenixville, and you're going to see things that you see at the moment. And then we're going to walk backwards to what they look like over the last 100 years or more in some instances. So instead of calling it then and now, it's going to be called now and then. Okay. So here we are. If you were up in a drone or you were on a helicopter over Montclair, this is what you would see of Phoenixville today. Those of you that are only familiar with Phoenixville in the last 15 or 20 years, this is what you are used to seeing. This is a far cry from what Phoenixville looked like when I came here in the mid-60s, and for people that were here before the mid-60s was even more different than that. So, I mean, you cross the bridge and there's the old railroad station, you see all these apartments, but we're going to work our way backwards. And you come up to Bridge Street, and we're used to having the place blocked off on Friday nights, and for months you can sit outdoors. We have all these street fairs, and we have all of these kinds of things. And you come down over the Gay Street Bridge from the north side of town, and we have this brand new apartment complex that just opened recently, and these other two. If you stood on the Gay Street Bridge and looked left or right, you would see all these townhouses and apartments. That's a far cry from what one would have seen 25 years ago. Because 25 years ago, they had torn down everything that was the Phoenix Steel Corporation. And you had this dark scar dividing Phoenixville in half. And in fact, when the Phoenix Steel shut their doors in the early 80s, one by one things were torn down, and this was the Great Dividing Line. And in fact, in 1987, a section of the community was designated by the state of Pennsylvania as a historic district. And that historic district ran from High Street up to about Reeves Park, and from Star Street over to about Buchanan Street. When the Phoenix Steel property was cleaned out, the state actually changed the historic district designation in Phoenixville, and all of the north side was eliminated. Now, the Historical Society, we made an issue out of it, wrote a letter of protest. That's about all you can do anymore. But state said the state law requires that a historic district has to be contiguous. And so this becomes open land, and the contiguous nature of the north side and the south side of French Creek was lost. So High Street and these streets over here, Vanderslice, and some of these smaller streets, they were all dropped from the historic district designation. However, as part of creating the historic district, every single dwelling and I don't mean just residences, but every single building that was in the historic district up here and down here had to be surveyed, photographed, and historical information gathered where possible, and architectural information. They were all put on 8.5 by 11 cards, and they all ended up in the Historical Society. So somebody that lives on Vanderslice Street could come down and say, I want to know what my house was like, when was it built, etc. And if you live in the historic district, we can pull that card, you can see a photograph of what that building looked like in 1987, but you can also get the general time period when it was constructed, some basic architectural information, etc. So keep in mind that for much of Phoenixville's history, Phoenix Iron and Steel and the Bridge Company was the dominant economic force in this community. And in fact, this is a picture postcard from 1961 of Phoenixville, and you can see the complex that was Phoenix Steel dividing the north and the south side of town. You can keep going back in history. This is a photograph from 1950, and you can still see that. What I always find interesting is it isn't looking at Phoenixville, but look at all the open space around it. Because open space being gobbled up is one of the major features of the last 20 years in our area. And we can keep walking back. If you stood on the Gay Street Bridge and looked around, this is what you would have seen 40 years ago. 40 years ago is 1985, so I have to add another 10 years then. Okay. But this is what you would have seen, this massive complex. Primary port. In fact, Pennsylvania Railroad had a railroad station that ran underneath the Gay Street Bridge. This is the first Gay Street Bridge. All of that, of course, is gone now. And in fact, the original bridges, this is a shot from the 1930s, and there's even more open space. So Phoenixville as a community has changed. In fact, in the late half of the second half of the 19th century, a lot of communities produced what were called bird's eye drawings, and actually send somebody up in a balloon and they do a sketch out of what a town looked like. And you can buy these on the internet, by the way. This is the earliest one that we know existed. This is what Phoenixville looked like according to an artist in 1874. And you can still see the basic layout with Phoenix Iron Company. It was then called the Iron Company in 1874, with the bridge division still dividing it. And you can see how much open space there is as well. I mean, when Phoenixville was created officially, legally in 1849, where we are right now was the boundary line of the borough of Phoenixville. Reeves Park was, where what would later become Reeves Park was the boundary line of Phoenixville from Schuylkill Township. And of course, over history, passage of time, Phoenixville has, in effect, expanded by absorbing land from Schuylkill Township. Not often to their desire. Okay, so we're going to cross the Montclair Bridge and we're going to travel around. This is the bridge you are all used to traveling over. It opened in 1997. It replaced a previous bridge that had opened in 1916. This was called the Inter-County Bridge. This is a picture postcard from 1922. It opened in 1916. And there's a hand-tinted colorized one. You'll notice the new automobile crossing the bridge. This bridge existed all the way from 1916 to the 1990s, when it was the concrete bridge and it was disintegrating. And some of you may remember that the borough of Phoenixville had a contest for the right to be the one to push the plunger to blow up the bridge. Somebody they sold chances through the chamber, and somebody got the right to push the button to blow up the bridge. So the bridge went down, and this major link between Phoenixville and Montgomery County ceased to exist. They were very fast in building this bridge because their previous experience in building this bridge that was demolished took over 5 years to build. Okay, the bridge that it replaced is this one. It's a covered bridge that was built in 1844. What's interesting is this was built by private investors, and this little building right here, the railroad station's right here. This little building was a toll house, and you had to pay a couple pennies for the privilege of crossing the river here to go to Montgomery County. And this bridge existed all the way till 1915. In mid-19 teens, they had done a lot of things with this bridge over the course of years, and there were gas lines, natural gas lines that ran across, attached to the bridge. And according to some accounts, it was struck by an automobile and the bridge caught fire. And that's the first bridge.
Wow.
And I did not put my most favorite picture in this. I should have. To the right of this photograph, we have a picture down in the Historical Society of a telephone pole, with a guy standing on top of the telephone pole to look at the structure.
Wow.
And he's surrounded by 6 live wires. And it just shows that doing knucklehead things have existed for many, many years. We just don't have knuckleheads in 2025. So this bridge was so important to the commerce of the area that they actually built a temporary bridge while they built the other bridge. And this was a bridge so narrow there was one-way traffic and they had to alternate. Can you imagine what that was like? So we're going to take a little walk around town here. Now if you come over into Phoenixville, there are buildings here that were here for decades. And in fact, this building, most people still call the Mansion House, that they've been here for a long time. It's undergone at least 2 other name changes in the last 15 years. That building was built prior to the Civil War.
Wow.
And was an inn. There were a lot of hotels and inns all along Bridge Street and surrounding Bridge Street because businessmen from the city coming out here to do work with the iron company was not a quick hop in the car, be there in 40 minutes. And they wound up staying overnight. So you had to have a lot of hotels and inns. So that building's been there for a while. This building is already undergoing renovation, and this isn't that old. This started out as a bank, changed names 3 times, I believe. It's undergoing renovation. Is going to be luxury apartments. Okay. But this building, what preceded that building? Well, between that building and this building, which is still there and has been a restaurant off and on, this was originally the engineering office of the bridge company. What was actually in between, here's the Mansion House, there's the building over there. This was the fabrication shop of the Phoenix Bridge Company. Here's a better picture of it. Okay, that was only torn down in the 1960s. Okay. So we work our way up Bridge Street, come across the bridge, and you see the Welcome to Phoenixville mural, half of which is now blotted out by them deciding to encase this outdoor eating area next to the distillery. Well, we have some nice restaurants, small shops. Over here we have one of the first beer joints in Phoenixville is now going under. In fact, they all closed today. You saw that in the news. Iron Hill. But it doesn't take too long ago that if you go before this very nice mural that was done, this is what that was there, Iron Hill, but this is what preceded it. And this is a picture from the early 1990s.
Wow.
So just imagine the change
Wow.
in recent years. Okay, there were a lot of small stores in those buildings when they were in good shape, and we have some great old photos as part of our collection down at the Historical Society. These are 2 stores that were located 128 and 130 Bridge Street. Some of you may recognize the name Detra. If I misspelled it, it should be an E there. And this was the Phoenixville's first dollar store. That's what they called it, Philadelphia one price dollar store, one price store in the 1890s. They were all But some of us would remember as mom and pop stores that are a dying thing in society. This is what Bridge Street, 100 block of Bridge Street looked like in about 1905. This is from an old picture postcard of it. Horse and buggy, crushed gravel streets. You can actually see some concrete sidewalks here, which was a modern addition to Phoenixville. If we go back into the 19th century, most of the sidewalks were wooden plank sidewalks, some of which would have overhanging canopies. Now there's some buildings that have been around for a long time. This is the Great American Pub, and of course we're used to, some of you will call that the Columbia Hotel. Building's still there, although they don't sell Schmidt's beer anymore. And by the way, if you see some things with bunting on it and all of that, most of that is from 1949, when Phoenixville had a big time celebration of it, the town's 100th anniversary of incorporation. But adjacent to that, there were a lot of other small stores. Some of you may remember the Trio restaurant, and there were some other places along there. Up in the right-hand corner, you can see the Wall Block Hotel or Inn. That whole area got wiped out by a major fire in 1989. And in fact, if you're really interested in, if you remember back then and curious about this, someone found some home movies of the fire department fighting the wall block in fire.
Wow.
And if you do a search on YouTube, it's about 30 minutes long. And it's interesting to watch. This was a devastating fire. Families lived in apartments above this place, were devastated. A lot of people were displaced. There were 2 fatalities. One person who jumped out of a window and was injured, who died the next day, and then his wife, they found her body inside the next day after the fire. That was put down. So that was all torn down. And of course, it is what we know it to be today. If you go across the street, all of this looks new to everybody too, and we're used to seeing this. There were all sorts of smaller businesses located along that side of the street. In fact, the building that was the last one down towards the end of where the iron company property was, and some of you may remember there were railroad tracks that ran on the diagonal from the railroad station into the Phoenix Steel on an angle. And so the last building there, this was the original Daily Republican's building, the Daily Republican newspaper building. Eventually it moved up and took over a defunct bank building. But there were all sorts of businesses all along both sides of the street. And some places were familiar to all of you. Some of you may have taken music lessons at Jaworski's, for example. That building had been there for quite a while, but the business was founded after World War II. There were earlier businesses. There was actually a company that sold coal and loaded the coal right on Bridge Street. This is their dump truck. Because a lot of the original houses of that era had small windows in their basement for a coal chute to slide coal down. Some people are shaking their heads yes to that. I can remember my grandparents vividly having coal delivered and all the dust kicking up as it was being done. So both sides of Bridge Street. Now in 1910, somebody produced a fascinating postcard. It was called a trifold postcard. It was this wide. And it was actually the equivalent of 3 postcards that could be folded together at the size of a single postcard. And if you look at this, what's really fascinating about it is you're looking up 3 streets, okay? You're looking west on Bridge Street, east on Bridge Street, and up Main Street. Okay. We have some of these that have been donated to us and they fall apart and you wind up with 3 postcards. And it's interesting because somebody had an original one, and some of you know John Keenan. His father was a printer and actually taught printing at the junior high school for a long time. he had a printing plate of this and can reproduce them. Quite interesting. But they're interesting because if we go up to that intersection today and we look at the four corners, it's vastly different than it was. And this can give you a look about what it looked like in 1910. And here's where it's split in half, and you can still see some of the differences. And you won't recognize some buildings, but there are some buildings that are still there. This building, Molly McGuire's, people that think of it before Molly McGuire's, it was Secrets, Phoenix News Agency. But not always. That was actually after World War II that it took that name. It actually had been there since before 1900, and it was a pharmacy. Dr. Henry Dancy. We actually have some pharmaceutical bottles from his down there. You notice this modern vehicle plus a horse. Across the street is a parking lot, and there are parts around Phoenixville. If you go around, I'm reminded of that song of about 20 years ago. They tore down something and built a parking lot.
Big paradise.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is the parking lot. There have been a lot of things on that corner. Some of you may remember this. There was a W.T. Grant department. They call it the department store. It's a 5 and 10. Those of us are old enough to remember 5 and 10s. And actually, when Grants went under, somebody tried to start an indoor farmer's market there for a number of years. Ultimately, it was torn down, but it replaced this building that was on that corner. This is a 4-story hotel. It was a complete wooden structure. Okay, it's one of the pictures we have in our collection shows a terrific political rally on that corner for somebody that was running for governor at the turn of the century. But this was the luxury hotel in Phoenixville. I mean, if you think about it, you go down the street, there are the engineering offices of Phoenix Iron Company. Go in another direction there, you can walk right into the plant or into the foundry building for that matter if you're on business. This building lasted until a fire basically wrecked it. And it was torn down in about 1950. And this is the demolition of that building in 1950. And that's when they built the Grants building. And if you look at this picture, what you can still see is this is the wall block in and the other buildings to the left of it. So it's interesting because the downtown area of Phoenixville has been really impacted by some major fires over the course of its history. The 100 block fire, the 300 block has had a couple of major fires. Some of you may remember in your lifetime, Lipnax and the lumberyard across the street, Shannon's, and you also have Jerry's Market.
So the clock tower, what's that? Do you know what building that is?
This building right here,
Yeah.
That's
No.
Gay Street School, isn't it?
No,
Gay Street Schools are this way.
No, that's on Church Street.
Gay
Probably
Street
the
School.
firehouse, probably.
Actually, this was a firehouse, and there was, what was also back here was the Church Street School. This is the back end of what was the Methodist Church. It's now the Senior Center, and this is Sacred
Sacred
Heart
Heart.
Tower across the way. This is what's on the other corner today. 2-story buildings, small shops, apartments up above. This corner has had a building on it since the 1840s, believe it or not. This is the building that preceded it. It was a Woolworths and other businesses and apartments located up there. You'll notice it's 4 stories. And if I go back, 2 stories. But it was all built on the same foundation. What preceded this building? We don't have a photograph, we have a sketch of it. This building was there at the time of the Civil War. And there were retail down below and offices and different things utilized in it at different times in our history. During the Civil War, there was a ladies' aid society that met there every week that knitted blankets and socks for the Union soldiers that came from Phoenixville in the Civil War. Before there was a public library, there was an organization trying to found a library in Phoenixville called the Young Men's Literary Society. And they met in this building as well. But, so that corner has been occupied. If you think about it, here we are in 2025, that corner has been occupied back into the 1850s. So it's remarkable. And of course, across the street, we've got the mural, second version of it, and Renaissance Park. This is what it looked like before there was a mural. And you wonder why there's open space there. And the reason is there was a building there. And that building had been there for many years. Some of you may remember there was a photographer called Sigmund in Phoenixville for decades. And he had his photographic studio on the 3rd floor. And he had a special window constructed to let in additional sunlight for his photography. They also had places down in the basement as well. Unfortunately, in the 60s, there was a major fire that destroyed that building. Now, we take a look on Main Street for a minute. Everybody has seen this building. And this building's reputation is what? The oldest house in Phoenixville. Okay. There are people that dispute that, by the way. This is a shot of what it looked like about 60 years ago. It was white stucco. If you do your homework and your research on this, what you will find is this little part of the building is the oldest house in Phoenixville. Okay. When somebody built a sawmill or grist mill down on the French Creek, which was the beginning of, before they even made nails, this is the little house that the guy lived in. Okay, so next time you go past, oops, I'm going too far. Next time you go past this place, just remember, look to the right. Look to the right. Okay, let's keep moving here. We'll be here till. I only have 150 pictures. And I pared it down from 189. So, okay. Here's another one of Phoenixville's beer joints. Okay. Most of you don't think of it as that, but you think of it as Superior Beverage. It was a bottling company. They bottled Hires root beer, Orange Crush. How long was that building there? Anyone have any idea? It was actually built after World War II. What preceded it were a bunch of small wooden structures, the most well-known of which was one of Phoenixville's first motion picture theaters. This is a photograph of the homecoming parade in 1910. Why they had a homecoming in 1910, I have no idea. 1910 doesn't match up with any significant date, 50 years, 70 years, whatever. But a lot of communities had this as a way of promoting a community. Phoenixville had a homecoming celebration in 1910. They also had one in 1925. But this was the Savoy Theater. It was a silent movie theater. Phoenixville had 3 movie theaters at one time. Most of you used to the Colonial, the Savoy, and the other one was the Rialto, which old timers tell me they call it the Rat House. The Rat House. Or Rat Hole. And I'll tell you that story. Okay, we look a little further. In fact, if I go back to this picture, you look way up on the hillside past the train, there are buildings up there, right where High Street meets North Main Street. And what you would have seen about 25 or 30 years ago are these 3 buildings and this space, which is now Andre Thornton Park. Okay, these 3 buildings, this building was built as an apartment house. It's still there. The other 2 buildings to the left have been a lot of different things over the years, including residences and a club, an ethnic club, etc. They were originally 3 mansions that were side by side, all built by Mr. Vanderslice for himself and for 2 of his sons. And the one on the right, the Vanderslices were connected back in the day with people connected with Phoenix Iron Company, etc. Governor Pennypacker was born in this house.
Ah.
Okay. The Governor Pennypacker from Phoenixville.
Oh, wow. What was the thing in between? Was that a church?
Church steeple.
Church steeple?
Oh, in between, no, it was a little chapel, I believe.
Oh,
Okay. Now we look at the 200 block for a minute. Of course, now we have the Colonial Theater and its addition to it was a bank building. We look at that in the 1930s. What I think you'll notice the difference is look at the marquee of the movie theater. Okay. This was the marquee in the 30s. It actually had what was called a badge because it was vertical, different marquee. This is from 1937. We actually looked when that movie was out. It was 1937. But much of Bridge Street hasn't changed very much. The names of who ran it, different stores and such, stayed the same. However, the Colonial Theater didn't originally look like that. This is the original Colonial Theater. And you walked in and down, and the theater was down below. There were offices and apartments up above it. There were stores on the left and right of it. In fact, there was a oyster bar in the basement of it. And there was a barber shop right here. And we have this photo, and if you scan it at a high resolution, so you can cut a piece out of it and blow it up, you can actually see a guy sitting in the barber chair. Right there. Okay. So Bridge Street, a lot of it's looked the same. This is, in effect, P.J. Ryan's Hotel Washington, if we go back to the day, early in the day. And we look down Bridge Street in the late 40s, you may see some places that look familiar. For example, or if we look at it in the 1920s, a little bit different. Had some businesses that aren't there anymore. Okay. For example, there was a hot dog stand right on Bridge Street. 5-cent hot dogs. Dogs and peanuts, 5 cents. Also was a car dealer right on the 200 block of Bridge Street. Sold the Willys, Knight, and Overland cars, none of which exist any longer, of course. But this is what Bridge Street looked like turn of the century. Now you'll notice on a lot of the buildings, they have balconies up top, canopies underneath. And some were cement sidewalks, some parts were wooden. Created a lot of problems when you had a snowstorm. This is 1895, 200 block of Bridge Street. I don't think you're going to run a plow in 1895 through Bridge Street. I would think that things shut down for a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
But some things may look familiar to you. Anybody recognize this building? This was actually a food store called the Bell Company. But take a look at the top of it. Okay. That later became the Majolica Restaurant, which is now another restaurant in town. But this building down at the corner, which has been a restaurant off and on, some of you may remember as Sleepy Hollow, sold mattresses and bedding and televisions. I can never figure out the connection. But that building has been there since about 1900, and it was a pharmacy. And if we go up the top, we can stand on at the top of Franklin Street, look down on Day Street Bridge. Nothing exciting about that photo, but we could stand there in 1905 that we were living in, and this is what Day Street Bridge looked like.
Was that wooden plank?
It was a boardwalk type. In fact, the original Gay Street Bridge is the only one that the Phoenix Iron Company had an involvement in the construction of. All the railings and the metal superstructure to it was built by the Phoenix Iron Company. It was replaced, it had been originally built in the late 1870s, it was replaced in the early 1920s by this very nice bridge that lasted into the 21st century, which is remarkable. What's interesting, of course, is railroad tracks ran underneath it, buildings from Phoenix Steel ran underneath it. This is the new bridge that was under construction. And this is one of the most interesting pictures. Somebody sent this to us in the mail out of the blue. We had never seen it before. And what's interesting is you can see them dismantling the old bridge over here while the new bridge was under construction. And what's interesting is if you stand and look up the Gay Street Bridge, you'll notice the bridge curves. It curves. The original Gay Street Bridge did not curve and hook up with Franklin Street, and that's why Franklin's got a different name than Gay Street, because it was two different, they weren't connected. What happened is, if you go to the left on the Vanderslice, there's a small street, runs right up here to High Street. And the Gay Street Bridge, pardon?
It's Kurtz.
Yes. And the bridge ran right up to that street. So that was the original Gay Street Bridge. This is what the original bridge looked like. And what's great about this photo is you can see the old silk mill in the background, and this is the High Street School as well. Some of you may have gone to the High Street School. And you can also see the Pennsylvania Railroad Station here.
Oh, my goodness.
This is a photo from about 1880.
Wow.
Okay. All right. Well, we get down a little further. Here's Borough Hall. And we know Phoenix has had other borough halls, but there were things there before that. Okay? And that was the fire that destroyed Shanneman's property. And that's where the borough hall was later constructed. You look across the street now, and we have another apartment house in Phoenixville. But, and that replaced what was a vacant lot for a long, long period of time, because there were other buildings that had been there in past years. People always ask, how can we have a supermarket down on Bridge Street? Well, they did. Not in your lifetime for some of you. Okay? We'll take a look at Nudies. Nudies is a good example of a building that's been reinvented, because it was Unger Chevrolet well into the 1950s. And in fact, in the open land across the street, where they would have a used car lot over there. Okay. And we look at the post office. This is what you see at the post office today. This is the addition that was added. Somebody may remember when the post office was added. What used to be where that addition was this marker. Was put up during World War II to honor Phoenixville men in the military, and had a symbol of all the branches of the service, and they would list the names of people who died during the war, and they kept adding names to it along the way. As impressive as this is basically plywood with a plaster veneer covering. So it was not designed to be a permanent thing. A lot of communities had these kind of things during the war. So that's long gone. The post office that you and I know originally was built in 1926. So the question is, where was the Phoenixville post office before that? Anybody have a guess? Nope. Recognize this building? Doesn't look too exciting. If you wonder, this is Prospect Street, this is Main Street. Little building on the corner. It's been a lot of things, workshops and stores. It's a store right now. That was the original post office in Phoenixville. And in fact, there it is as the post office. This is the first official group of letter carriers in Phoenixville. Okay. And I bet he was a tough boss. And he was a tough boss. Okay. Now, the Historical Society is on the corner there. Most of you know it was originally a Lutheran church. Before it was a Lutheran church, it was a Mennonite church for only 3 years. What happened is the Mennonites had a facility. This is what the original Mennonite building looked like. This is what the original wall looked like. And that's what the cemetery looked like. In the early 1890s, the Mennonites founded a church on that corner. And over the course of time, their membership shrunk. And by the late 1860s, early 1870s, they decided the only way to keep their congregation alive was to build a new modern church. So in 1873, they built, oops, I went the wrong way. Let me go again. Here we go. They built this building, not this back part. This is the modern 1905 edition. Okay. They built this building thinking it would help save their congregation. That lasted 2.5 years. They were sharing the building with a group of Lutherans who were not German-speaking Lutherans, but English-speaking Lutherans. Apparently never the twain shall meet, back in the 1870s. And in 1875, they sold the building to what became Central Lutheran Church. And it was Central Lutheran Church up until they merged with St. John's in 1969. And in 1980, the Historical Society bought the building. But this is what was on that corner previously. This small building back in the day. Okay. Across the street, of course, we have Wells Fargo Bank that's not there anymore. And it's up for sale, the building. But if you look carefully across the top, it says Farmers and Mechanics National Bank. And this building replaced this one. This was the building that was actually on the corner there for a long, long time. What's interesting, if you look at this building, there's a building that runs right up against it. And there's a church behind it. Here's a picture postcard from 1910 that shows what it says up above there, Farmers and Mechanics Bank, St. John's Lutheran. And that's the parking lot now. But before it was a parking lot, this is where the church was located. When St. John's built a new church out at St. John's Circle in Schuylkill Township, this building was torn down.
Wow.
Okay. This is a nice looking building that had major interior problems. A lot of the old churches, one went in, you had to go up steps to the sanctuary. And they had these narrow little steps with pictures of people with choir gowns trying to go up these steps and so on. Some of the artifacts that were in that building have been saved.
Parking too.
You know, parking was brutal. Yeah, we have a home movie that somebody shot in 1960 of someone standing at the corner of Church and Main at 11:15 on a Sunday morning, just taking film of all of the cars trying to go to all the different churches that were on Church Street. Baptist Church, Central Lutheran, Sacred Heart, Methodist Church, St. Peter's. Think about that. And you have all these, just think of the cars in the late 50s, early 60s. Big cars with fins on them, you know. Got 11 miles to a gallon if you were lucky. And I think they used that as a propaganda film to get the congregation to move somewhere else. Anyway, if you go a little further down the street, of course, we have Sacred Heart Church, was actually founded at the turn of the century by one of the ethnic groups in Phoenixville.
Slovaks.
Mostly Slovaks. But you'll notice it says 1923, because that's their second building. The first building was a wooden structure that burnt down. And this is the original building on the left-hand side, and then this was the house next door to it. But this is where that Sacred Heart Church is now located. And that building originally was the first St. John's Lutheran Church, and it was actually used as a library in Phoenixville before the library we have. And of course, that's it. Tear down something and build a parking lot. Okay. This is the most recent parking lot in Phoenix, so it's next to the senior center. Most of us know that that's where Phoenix Firehouse, fire number 1 was. Actually, that's 2 buildings together. The gray stone on the right-hand side was actually the Church Street School, one of the first elementary schools in Phoenix. It was still in use into the 1960s. When I first started teaching, I had some kids that had gone to that school.
Jack, that tower, is that the clock tower we
Yes.
saw previous?
Yes, and that's, when they they did a major renovation which basically gutted the artistic side of it.
Yeah.
So that's what you ended up with. Anyway, and of course, the Methodist Church eventually became Phoenixville Senior Center. Now, you go to the bottom of the street, that's where the Pottery Company was located. Now it's where St. Peter's Place and another parking lot are located. We look at where the Phoenix Federal Building is. Until that was built, this mansion stood on that corner. This is a guy who made his fortune running natural gas pipes in Phoenixville.
Oh, my goodness.
Across the street, of course, is another bank. What was there, for a lot of you, was the YMCA. But this wasn't the first YMCA in Phoenixville. This is the first YMCA, this house that was next to the old Rialto Theater. And what's most interesting, it was torn down and they built the Y that most of you are familiar with. This building that became the movie theater had been there in the 1850s.
Wow.
In fact, it was called Temperance Hall. Yeah, there was a temperance society in town. And it was the place where they had all sorts of town meetings over support of the Civil War, over temperance. Political candidates would meet there because it was the biggest building, one of the biggest buildings in town. Okay. A couple other things, then we're going to go up on Nut Road, and then we'll be finished. That's what was there before Beverage World. People often wonder, well, how come there aren't many gas stations in Phoenixville? There were a lot, but they're not there any longer. Okay. There's another parking lot, Presbyterian Church. What was there? This was part of that complex. Was the American Legion building. That's long gone. So let's go up for a minute to Nut Road. Okay. South Main Street, Gay Street. Everything here is Phoenixville Hospital, but not originally. Okay. On that corner, and that's the corner with Manavon Street. This is what it looked like several years ago. There was a gas station there. Now there's the Korean chicken joint. What I liked about all the pictures we have of that intersection is that's what the gas station looked like. My favorite road sign in Phoenix.
0.
So if you look at that, you knew that you had arrived. And if anybody asks you how far are we from Philadelphia, there you go. 28 miles. Okay, 28 miles. And this is what that intersection looked like in 1900. Yeah, trolley line ran down Main Street. Some of those big houses were there back then. And all the houses that are over here were part of an estate known as the Knoll. Okay.
What year is that picture? Sorry.
Picture early 20th century. Very early 20th century. The trolley line went out of business in about 1915 or so. So we have the hospital. That's not the original Phoenixville Hospital. In fact, the original Phoenixville Hospital wasn't even on this location. Okay. It was preceded by their modern update in 1966. Some of you may have been in a room there at one time. But that was preceded by this building that was built at the turn of the century. But the original hospital was one of the houses on Mill Street that was right across the road from Phoenix Iron Company. Well, of course, times change and medical needs change. We have a great collection of photographs of the inside of the hospital in the first 30, 35 years of its existence. And if you look at what an operating room looked like, I'm glad you are living in 2025. Next door was the high school. Now, the high school was constructed in 1911, opened in 1912. People asked me, well, if that was the high school and that was torn down in the 50s, We have a couple pictures of the demolition of it, courtesy of Frank and Joanne. What was the high school, or where was the high school before this one was built? Anybody know? No, it was the Gay Street School. The Gay Street School served as the high school. And in fact, last week, somebody came in and donated some photos to us. And it was the graduating class of 1911, standing on the back steps of the Gay Street School in their caps and gowns, and there were about 20 graduates or so, 1911. But they didn't know, they knew it was 1911, but they didn't know where the school was. And I said, well, this is a real piece of Phoenixville history, because it is the last class to graduate from the Gay Street School in high school. Interesting. We never know what comes in the door down in society. We get all sorts of interesting stuff. And we have thousands of photographs. So me telling you I got about 150 here, you're seeing, I'm scraping a little bit of ice off the ice. Okay, across the street from the hospital. This is what everybody's used to seeing, the Gateway Pharmacy. This is what preceded. And people that lived here in the 50s and 60s are familiar with that, of course. When you realize how small it was compared to now, okay, because they put the addition on it, and this is a less than exciting photograph taken from across the street where the now closed 7-Eleven was located. But they put a mural on it, which I think is really quite attractive.
Absolutely.
Okay, big difference.
What street did it originally open up onto?
It was on, I'll go back to the original one.
Yeah.
Okay, if I can get there.
That's from Fifth Avenue.
Yeah. The original one was basically where the building is now,
Right.
and the hospital would be on the left, right across the street from it.
Right.
So this was along Nut Road.
So it opened up onto Nut Road?
Yeah, but the way Fifth Avenue runs,
Right.
it's angled.
Right.
It'd be the Eacock family, right?
Pardon?
Eacock family.
And there was a gas station there, originally on that corner. There was a gas station on that corner. Okay, now, what happened? Wait,
That your last one?
and I hit, no, it isn't, I hit the wrong button.
Uh-oh. Yep, okay.
All right, I hit the wrong button. Should go to the next one, here we go. All right, let's end with a couple pictures here. Everybody's familiar with Dunkin' Donuts, that renamed themselves as just Dunkin'. But, what preceded Dunkin' Donuts? No, what preceded Roy Rose?
Gino's.
Gino, the 15-cent hamburger, right? I'll tell you a little story about that. We had a coach at the high school when I was athletic director, and they were going to be in a championship, either field hockey or lacrosse game. And the principal at the time said, if you win this game, I will take you to a French restaurant. And she asked which one, and he said, Roy Roger's. Anyway, so that's where Gino's was located. Okay. Now, there's some places in Phoenixville, businesses don't last there.
Yeah.
Okay. Boston Market already has a sales sign. It was preceded by other eating places. Once there was a bicycle shop there, then a gas station. When we go back to post-World War II, there was a restaurant there called The Hut. It was actually a Quonset hut. Okay? So, we get down the street, we got Walgreens, and we've got Pat's Pizza. All right. What most of you are used to is the Val Rio Fountain Inn, which somebody tried to gussy it up by calling it La Fontana. A rose by any other name. This is what the Fountain Inn looked like in 1922. Okay. So, now they have the Revolutionary War marker is along the road because the island where it sat for many, many years, this is what you were used to seeing. PennDOT is going to change this intersection somewhere in our lifetime. That's what somebody told me they're going to put a circle in there. I don't know if that's the case. I love the way rumors float around Phoenix. Anyway, but PennDOT told them they have to move the marker because we're gonna do something with the intersection. They moved the marker 2 years ago and they haven't done zilch yet, okay? However, that marker's been there for a very long time.
Wow.
This was installed in 1907. And what I love, it had a fountain with it. What I like most about this picture is, here's a similar shot. There was one house along Nut Road there. One house.
Wow.
Now, we have whizzed through 148 pictures. So I'm gonna end with this one. Okay? You come down Route 113, come into Phoenixville, you will see this sign. And I think it is a really indicative of how Phoenixville has survived and morphed into other things through the years. It's gone a long way from just being an industrial town tied to particularly one industry to being a residential community. Now, before I leave and take questions, I just want to say, the Historical Society has been under a major renovation project for the last 3.5 to 5 years. And in doing that, we have been able to finally reopen fully last June and have doubled the size of our museum. And some of you have been there already. If you've not been there, we would invite you to come down and we'll give you a guided tour. But we're very proud of what we have done. We've expanded our research library. Pardon? We put an elevator in for those of you who would like to go to the second floor. But we're also expanding our hours. Now, traditionally, we've been open on Wednesdays and Fridays from 9 to 3. We're now opening on the first Friday evenings from 6:30 to 9. And at least until January, until the winter weather hits, we will be opening on the third Sunday of the month from 1 to 4. And we started to recruit more volunteers because we're an all-volunteer organization. We asked people who were interested in becoming a docent to help guide people in the museum. And I was told yesterday, I said, how many people have offered to become a museum? We have 19 people who have offered to do that. So we're organizing a training program for that to educate them so that they can field questions that might be thrown their way. But I appreciate all of you coming tonight. It's probably raining like cats and dogs.
Hopefully it's not, but it was.
For work,
yes.
I wouldn't go past an hour, and I made it 20 minutes.
Thank you, Jeff.
Anybody have any questions?
Questions, yes.
Yeah,
Where was the Historical Society before 1980?
before 1980,
Before you
Was
built
it?
the church?
it had no place, it had no home. It would it would have public meetings in churches and in other public buildings. Most of the original archives that they started to gather and were donated to them were all in storage in Freeze Insurance's basement. But they had the opportunity to acquire the Central Lutheran building when the two churches merged, and the church that had been renting that space was leaving. And so they bought, they bought the building in 1980. And then they started accumulating. We've grown to the point where we now have 7 rooms storing artifacts and documents on the second floor. We have over 47,000 items in our collection, and at least 10 to 12,000 photographs, if not more. And we never know what comes in the door, but I will tell you, we never catch up. So drop in, we'd be glad to give you a walk around. Questions, sir?
Yeah. When did the iron and steel works close?
It closed gradually, basically in the late 70s, early 80s. One by one, they started closing divisions.
It seemed like through the lecture that there were a lot of ethnic groups, like Polish and German and others and stuff like that. And I noticed that they have their own churches, and an awful lot of those churches have closed. Phoenixville seems to be a lot bigger place now than it was back then.
Well, if you look at I don't want to get too sociological here, but if you look at the demographics of church membership, unfortunately, people don't go to church any longer. But at one time, there were more churches in Phoenixville, and many of them were originally founded with an ethnic connection. Sacred Heart's a good example of that. St. Mary's on the north side was originally founded by Irish workers in Phoenixville. And in fact, you can walk through St. Mary's Cemetery, and if you look at the names on the tombstones, the further out from the church you get, all of a sudden you start to see Italian names and Polish names as well. Holy Trinity on Dayton Street was founded by Polish immigrants, and in fact, almost up to the last 40 years, all of the priests that were assigned there had to be able to speak Polish. It's a lot of the churches in the early years were bilingual. They would have services in multiple languages. St. John's and the EUB, the Brethren Church, that's a small church. It's been a residence for a long time. It's across the street from the Gay Street School on
Main Street.
not on Main Street, but it's facing the school on Morgan Street.
Oh, Morgan, that one.
They were the last two churches to give up services in German. They did that during World War I when anything German wasn't particularly popular, as you can imagine. But they were the last two that gave up bilingual services.
Was Forge Theater a church also further at?
Forge Theater? Forge Theater was originally a funeral home.
Funeral home.
Yeah.
Which is why it's purportedly haunted.
Pardon?
Which is why it's purportedly haunted. There's a question,
There's so many
comment.
jokes I could throw out.
There's a question, comment from
This is
someone on
anyway.
Zoom. Do you have any pictures of the Civic Center or the Moose Lodge? I think both of them are now being torn down.
We do have some of those buildings, yes.
Okay.
And there are a lot of other places I could have included in this, but I was up against the clock. And there's an old saying we used to say when people would talk to groups about how long people can sit and listen. The mind can only absorb as long as the seat can endure. So try to hold that within the hour. Anyway, any other questions? We do have a lot more pictures at the Photos of the Society, and you're welcome to come in and browse through them. We have them divided by categories. So if you're interested in churches, we have boxes that are exclusively photographs of churches, schools, sports. We have a complete separate section of photos just related to the iron and steel industry, social organizations, bridges, etc., railroads, and they're all available for people to browse. We can run copies for people for a modest price. We get requests like that a lot. Most recently, there's some new signage that's been put up in the Montclair area related to the canal. When Montgomery County took over the responsibility from the Canal Association, they wanted to put new signage along the towpath over there, and they came in and we gave them photographs that we had for them to use. The only stipulation being that they acknowledge us as the source. If you walk along the trail over along French Creek on the old Iron Company property, there's some signage there that shows the buildings that used to be there. All of them, those photos came from our collection as well. Other questions anybody had?
Anybody on Zoom with anyone? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Where is Montgomery County? Where do you go from here to get to Montgomery County?
Schuylkill River is the Great Barrier. As soon as you cross the Schuylkill River, you are in Montgomery County.
So on the other side of the Gay Street Bridge, that's Montgomery
No,
County?
no, Montclair Bridge.
Montclair Bridge.
The Montclair Bridge.
That's the one.
That's why if you come to the end of Bridge Street, there's a
Yeah.
bridge crosses the Schuylkill
Right.
River.
And so that's
The
no,
Schuylkill River is the dividing line between Phoenixville and Montgomery, Chester and Montgomery County.
and that's not Phoenixville anymore?
No, never was.
Oh, okay.
It never was, but in a sense it was, because at one time before they reorganized school district locations, kids in Montclair went to Phoenixville High School. And there was a restructuring of school district boundary lines, and now they go to Springfield. Okay. My early years in my teaching career, I used to have a lot of kids that played on some of the sports teams from Montclair. Yeah,
And the library always gave them a library card, even though they were
Yes.
out of county and not
yeah.
being.
And of course, where Produce Junction is right across from it, there's a residence on the corner that's like an off-white color. That was originally the post office. But what has happened in a lot of these small communities, the post office has consolidated that and eliminated that. So Sanatoga doesn't have a post office anymore. They have a substation of the Pottstown post office. And Limerick Township doesn't have a post office. They have a small postal office, but it's a substation of the Royersville post office. But that's kind of the way of the world. Yeah, yeah.
All the work you've done for Historical Society, what's your favorite spot in Phoenixville?
My favorite spot.
I know it's like picking a favorite child.
My favorite place.
Yeah.
If I say a favorite place, they'll probably tear it down. Don't put me on the spot there.
Not the historical
The
society.
historical.
That's a trick question.
I have been an active volunteer there since 2000
Wow.
and had been a member there for 20 years previously, but until I retired from the school district, I never had the time to give the commitment to it. So the Historical Society is my second home in many ways. Anyway, thank you all for coming.